Welcome back in, my friends. Well, this is episode number 3, the conclusion of our M60A3 project, Sandbox Boneyard. Our M60s have been retired from service, and they're left out into the desert sun, just waiting to be scrapped or salvaged. Of course, we painted our M60 in the last episode, and in this episode, well, we're going to paint some fellows here. Maybe they're model enthusiasts coming out to the boneyard to take a few reference photographs, and then, of course, we'll put the whole entire scene together. Again, a lot to do in this episode. Let's get started. I'm going to begin with just a quick look back at some of our references. The desert scene shown here, of course, and then what's also important is that the vehicles have settled into the groundscape themselves. The weight has dropped them below the level of the earth, and I want to portray that as well in this scene. So the first thing I want to do, well, just mark out basically the edges of where the wheels are. So we're going to make some divots in our foam here in order to settle this tank down into the earth. Just drawing on a few quick reference lines onto the foam, and then we can go ahead and score into the earth and remove some of that foam. Before I get too much further along here, let's do a quick test fit, making sure everything's starting to lock into place. Okay, that worked out fine, and you can see that the wheels are below the ground level, which is great, exactly what I was looking to do. I'm going to go ahead and add just a thin layer of Sculpey to the bottom of the divots, and this is mostly just to aid in the placement of the vehicle. So once I have the putty in place or the clay in place here, I can just press down a bit and get the exact alignment of the wheels within the divots. Well, now that that's in place, let's go add some texture to our groundwork, and for that I'll be using a combination of AK Terrains pastes. I'll begin with the dry ground. This is a nice neutral color, a nice earth color like we'll be using for a final. We'll do some painting later on, you'll see that, but more importantly it's got a really nice texture with which that kind of mimics that sandy soil that we're seeing in our reference photographs. Got some grit to it, a few little stones and rocks here and there. Once the dry ground is dried, I follow this up with an application, a light application, almost a wash in places, using the beach sand. And this will just help fill in some of those gaps and kind of even out the textures, give it a little bit more of a sandy, windswept appearance. Now, I'm not saying desert scenes are boring, but I do want to give it a little bit of interest, and I know this is not in the references, but I'm going to add some of this crackle paste here and there, and this will just give some interesting textures to the groundwork. The paste is really easy to work with and basically does all the work all by itself over time. Simply spread it out over the surfaces that you wish to have the cracked texture. A thin coating will result in smaller cracks or smaller little fissures, and a thicker coat will have larger fissures or larger crack sections. Once the paste is applied onto the surface to your liking, just set it aside and allow it to cure. It does take some time to dry, and in my case, I let it dry overnight. And then the next day, just a light airbrushing, using some of the same colors I used to paint the tank itself, just to unify all these different texture paste colors. This base needs to dry for just a little bit longer before I continue moving on. So let's work on our figures here. We're going to be using 2 of the figures from this photographer set, the 2 modern guys, the current guys. Nice little sprue set here, 2 sprues of figures, 1 sprue of accessories. And these guys, I don't know, what's the story here? From the local club, came out to the boneyard to take some reference photographs, or perhaps they traveled the distance to come take these photographs, spending the day out in the sun. Now, I'm not very imaginative, so we're just going to paint them basically as the box art shows on the rear side. Well, now we're speaking of painting, and especially figure painting. I'm going to try something a little bit different on these figures. So I primed them in white. So no black, no zenithal light, just primed in white. And then I've gotten some comments through some of the chats and stuff saying that blue is a good color that I need to kind of incorporate into some of my skin tones. So I thought, what if I pre-shade, not really pre-shade, just give a wash of a light blue color here. And hopefully some of that blue will translate through these layers of skin color. Now, in terms of actually painting these figures, I'm going to change it up one more time again here. I want to try something a little bit different. So I've applied these glazes or these light washes of the blue over the surface of the skin area. And now I'm going to start applying washes of skin tone or these glazes in very successive but incredibly thin layers, slowly building up the colors. The idea here is that the colors will start to collect within the darker creases or facial areas, and that will become some of the more shadow areas. Meanwhile, it will kind of distribute out over the top of the higher features, allowing some of the white, or in this case the light blue, to kind of show through, and these will become some of the highlights. The other benefit that I'm hoping to get from painting in this style with these glazes or very light washes is that I'll get a nice smooth color layer. And oftentimes when I'm doing my figure painting, especially under photographs, it ends up being a little bit, I don't know, coarse, the texture of the surface. So I'm hoping by thinning down my layers, adding multiple layers, but very thin layers, glazes as I said, that I'll be able to take care of some of that surface detail. I guess if there's a downside to this technique, it's just that it takes a very long time to do. Adding all these different layers and glazes, it just takes time. But perhaps that's been my problem all along, is I've been trying to rush the process. As I mentioned earlier, they're going to use the same idea, the same glazing or light wash techniques also on their clothing. So with this fellow, I guess this is Pat, his green top here, same thing, just light applications of the green color just to build up that color profile. And then I can go ahead and pick out things such as his backpack straps in a more traditional manner. Moving down to his trousers, as you can see, same idea, light washes, light glazes, highly thinned, just drawing them down over the entire surface. And we'll do this over and over again until I have the saturation and the coverage that I'm looking for. And then there's this fellow, and I guess this is Mike. And again, I'm following basically the color plates as a reference on the back, trying to paint these guys as there was shown on the box art. And oh, I think that was kind of a mistake. Well, I don't know if it was a mistake, but I did not realize what a challenge painting an orange top like this was going to be. This took me a long time to do in this manner. Multiple glazes, multiple washes. Changed the colors here and there a bit just to try to get some more saturation. This took his top, his sweatshirt. My gosh, that took me the better part of a day. However, I did stick with the plan and we got through it, and now I can just start adding some of the details, his backpack, and once again going back into some of these areas and adding certain highlights and shadows in a more traditional manner just with a small brush. And there they are. There's, what did we say, Pete and Mike, or Mike and John, or whatever. Here they are anyway. I forget their names. Our photographers all ready to spend the day out on the field taking a look and taking some photographs of their M60A3. This channel and these videos are brought to you in large part through the support of Patreon. If you are enjoying these videos and this channel, please consider showing your support. In return, special viewing of these videos, special project videos, photographs of ongoing projects, a Discord server to show off our own work. The link for Patreon is in the description below. I hope you consider joining. Thank you. Well, that was quite the diversion working on those figures, but the good news is that our base is now completely dry and cured, and now we can continue on and do our final finishing on this. We have some great textures on the base. We've somewhat unified the colors through the airbrush. Now it's time to pick out all the details. As you can see, the crackle paste has done a great job of adding some really characteristic elements to the base, the foundation here. We'll pick out some of these using the brush just to add that little bit of visual interest and sparkle. And then I want to continue to unify the colors here and add some visual interest, some depth and shadows in this case. So I've got Van Dyke Brown. This is a Winsor Newton color. Just making a wash with that, just a real quick wash. And we'll apply this over the entire surface. And this will just seep down into some of those cracks, especially around the crackle paste itself, and just deepen in those shadows a bit. And we're going to start building these effects, as we always do, from the ground up. Over that, a light sand color or dust color. And you can see I'm fairly lazy, just a blob, what will be underneath the tank itself. And just spread that around the surface. And once again, just adding layer after layer of colors and textures. Now, into the divots where the tank vehicle is going to be sitting. Now we're going to start getting ready to lock things into place here. So one final application of the dry earth into those ruts. Just kind of spread that around there. Because once again, this vehicle is going to be set into the groundwork itself. So it's going to be somewhat below the surface. So I want to make sure everything is nice and tight and unified around here. And this will be a multi-step process. But the first step here is get some of this groundwork into those ruts. I'm going to cover the entire surface with some saran wrap or clear wrap here because I don't want to get it all over my vehicle. Not yet. But we're going to go ahead and set that into place. Oops, come on. Set it in place and give it a good squish down in there. Now we have our wheels perfectly aligned. We'll pull off that wrap in just a little while. Allow this to set up, and now our location is locked in forever. Once again, a quick look at our references, and even though this is a desert environment, as you can see, there's quite a bit of vegetation within the landscape, and I want to capitalize on that because that's going to make our base much more interesting. These happen to be small seed pods, naturally brown in color, but I just wanted to green them up a little bit, so just a quick dip into some green paint. And now it's just a matter of planting grass all around the base. As with any scenic base, it's the variety that you can add to the scene that actually kind of makes it look more natural. And in this case, along with those little seed pods, I'm also planting some grass tufts. I've got various colors and sizes and textures of those. I've got some items from the blue bowl of good stuff, some small sticks and twigs that I'll be adding to the scene as well. So just slowly but surely trying to build up as many elements onto this base as I possibly can. At this point, the dry ground that I added into the ruts has nearly cured. It's nearly dry, but it still has a little bit of give to it. So I want to get the vehicle, the model, really set into place now. This will be the last time, so now it's permanently locked in, but I can squish it down into that dry mud. And now it's just a matter of building up the landscape around these road wheels. Again, we talked about it in the last episode. These road wheels were going to become sort of important because I think it was very characteristic of these scenes where these vehicles had dropped into the earth, kind of sunk down there, and then the sand and dirt has kind of swept into the wheels themselves, and some grass and things like that have gone into those. That really caught my eye, so I want to make sure I replicate that here as well. Of course, adding these new layers of dry ground, I need to integrate them and incorporate them with the rest of the scene. So same process, adding bits of oil paints and oil washes, same colors as before, and then coming back in and picking out some of those stones using the same colors as we have earlier on in the process. And then as a final step, let's see if we can kick up the color profile here just a little bit with some pigments. And this will serve two purposes. The first, as I mentioned, we'll be able to shift some colors around on the base and just add some visual interest. And secondly, using the pigments, as we'll apply it here in a second, we can add some kind of a sandy texture to it as well. So super easy techniques. First application, just brushed it on dry around some of these areas. Lock it into place using pigment fixer, just dropping it on with an eyedropper. With the second round of pigments, I want to change the application just slightly. So once again, we'll flood the surface with the pigment fixer. And now with the brush, I load it up with pigments and just tap it over the top, allowing the pigments to just drop onto the damp surface. The fixer will lock the pigments in place, but because they're falling, now I get a little bit of texture, more of a sandy texture. And then the back and forth process continues as I add more grasses here and there, small stones and sticks, pick out some extra details, everything just working to try to build into this final presentation. And then speaking of small details and final presentations, I noticed in one of the photographs, one of those reference photographs, that there was basically a stack of wood, old wood sitting to the side. And I thought, well, that'd be kind of a fun element to add to this scene as well. To paint out and age these little pieces of wood, I've just randomly given them just a couple of streaks here and there of either a light blue color or a light gray color, just to give that aged, that washed out worn effect. And then a quick wash using carbon black ink. And then just let these dry for a few minutes. This could not be more simple, but it's fairly effective. Now it's just a matter of setting these into place in some sort of a natural looking manner. And I think that's going to be the last details. Let's spin this around a bit and see how this is starting to look. Not bad from that side. Yeah, I think we're getting close. I think we're there. What do you think? So now the last thing we need to do is we've got our friends, Pat and Mike, and we need to add them to our base. And we'll just kind of stick them here and there, and we'll move these around a little bit as we start composing the scene for the final appearance here. But they look in place. Not so bad, huh? They look like they're enjoying themselves, taking their photographs, finding that perfect angle. And with that, I think we're coming to a wrap with our M60 Sandbox Boneyard scene. I've enjoyed doing this scene. I hope you have too. It's been something a little bit different. Love doing the little modern figures, changing up the paint job on those a little bit. Working on the M60, that was a lot of fun. Not a lot of conversion on it, but the things we did I think were kind of important. Taking off that idler wheel and such, I think that added to the scene as well. If you've enjoyed this project and liked this series, please hit that like and subscribe. Don't forget to do that. And if you'd like to support this channel even further, I do have a Patreon page, and the link for that is in the description below, and I'd really appreciate your support over there. Well, as I said, this is the end of this chapter, this series here, so 3 episodes on the M60. I think we had a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it, like I said. And now it's time to pull out a box and let's see what we can do next. So until the next one, guys, take care, and of course, happy modeling.